Hello, everyone, and welcome to WK2's Hiring Equity, transforming the recruiting process to build more inclusive teams from the start. My name is Arthur Woods. I'm pleased to be your moderator today. My pronouns are he, his, him. I'm the co-founder of a company called Mathison, which focuses on leading research and helping companies build equitable hiring practices that help them hire and retain more diverse job seekers for their highest priority roles. At Mathison, we've been at the helm of some really exciting research to really uncover the barriers that different job seekers face in the hiring process. We work with hundreds of underrepresented communities to really understand not only how we can develop a more holistic definition of diversity, but help employers unlock this amazing capability to build a representative workforce where people thrive and advance. Today, we know that diversity hiring is top of mind for most leaders. The events of the last year have really elevated the urgency of this work, and the vast majority of organizations today are thinking about how they can mobilize their intent to really result in impact. And I'm really pleased today to be with some amazing leaders who are also in different ways really helping advance this movement to build equity in our workplace. Scarlett Richards, the head of people at A Million Ads. Shawnee Mayers, the head of talent at the Elephant Room, and Simon Minty, the director of Sminty and the host of BBC's podcast, Ouch. As we navigate today, our hope is that this conversation helps us really unlock for leaders and organizations who are keen to make progress in this effort to build a diverse and equitable workforce. What are ways we can start? How can we demystify this conversation and make it accessible for everyone? And Scarlett, I'd love to start with you. Tell us a little bit about your work as head of people at Million Ads. What made you personally passionate to focus on work in equity and inclusion in the workplace?
Yeah, thank you. Hi. So part of what I've been doing recently, actually, at A Million Ads, is leading the company inclusion and diversity drive, and that's alongside our head of talent. And I say that I think one of the biggest things I've learned from that is getting feedback from your existing staff is really important because it shows you where those gaps are in the knowledge. And I think a big thing about getting everyone on board is having those education pieces and having those training pieces that are really valuable. So the feedback piece, I think, is really important in doing this drive. And it really gets everyone on side because it gives them something that's actually meaningful rather than just, I think what sometimes it becomes is a box ticking exercise. And that's what I'm really trying to avoid. So yeah, I'm just trying to make it as meaningful as possible. And I mean, it's something I'm particularly passionate about is listening to what people have to say that currently work here. So, inclusion is so important because it's just the entire foundation of company culture. And for me, if you haven't got that inclusivity and empathy amongst your workforce, I mean, the culture is just going to be non-existent. So creating that environment where people feel they can have that unique voice, where ideas and new opinions are encouraged, and that transparency and openness as well. And that all helps to build that inclusive environment.
Thank you, Scarlett. Yeah, what a great point to listen to your people, go straight there and ask the question, where can we improve? Where do we have gaps? I think that's such a great internal litmus test.
Yeah.
Thank you. And excited to carry on the conversation with you. And switching gears a little bit, Shawnee, I would love to hear about your work as the head of talent at the Elephant Room. And you're at this extremely exciting intersection of work that is helping organizations also outwardly kind of communicate some of this work. So tell us about, so your journey and what got you passionate about this work around inclusivity in the workplace.
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, I mean, I don't have a background in advertising. I didn't actually see myself in marketing at all. But when I was sort of just finishing uni about 21, I became a part of an alumni network, which was set up by a youth marketing agency. And they had suggested, we think you've got great skills. You should really consider marketing as a career. And I did that, entered the industry sort of, I say 6 months later in an internship that was completely new. And it was all about sort of making sure that diverse people from different backgrounds who weren't necessarily clued up about what the industry has to offer can enter that space and hopefully thrive there. But what happened was that when I got to this the agency that I went to, that's us at the moment. That's the Elephant Room, which is great. And initially I was at a bigger agency. I was so taken aback by so much of being someone who was considered different, quote unquote. I didn't know that there was this diversity and inclusion conversation problem issue. I didn't know anything about that. I just thought, what? Like, how are you struggling to find Black people for your organization? Like, there's Black people everywhere. Like, that was in my head. But I think at the time, then I realized that actually this is a bigger conversation. It's not just about race. It's not just about sexuality. It's about so much more. And that's where I feel like equity becomes a big part of the conversation, because you can say to someone, oh my gosh, we've got this opportunity, and hand it to them. But if they're not aware of how to be operate in that space, how to navigate the space, the language that's used in that space, you're almost setting them up for failure. So they need to have the resources, they need to have the understanding, they need to have like what Scarlett was saying, like making sure that they're constantly giving the feedback to understand, to shape their experience, to make sure that you can retain those people at the end of it. And I think as at the Elephant Room, that's kind of why we wanted to create something that was sort of just built off everything that has to do with inclusion, has to do with the idea of diversity, everything that is around access, everything that is about representation. And it's not something that is like on our agenda, quote unquote. It's just something that is embedded, like it's just embedded within what we do. And it's just how we work, and it's the type of organization that we are. So if someone does enter our space, or if someone does enter our company, they can look up at senior leadership and think they can be there because they can see the representation of different types of people, or they can see that we're actually on a journey of making sure that we're supporting different initiatives that occupy spaces, whether it be within the conversation around disability, whether it be in the conversation around the LGBTQ community, whether it be in the conversation around women in tech. They feel like, oh my gosh, okay, they care about this, so I know that I can belong. And I feel like a lot of the time, well, in my own personal experience, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, like the whole industry is talking about this. I think maybe we should care now. And that's kind of where it goes a bit wrong, because then you don't know where it's coming from. You don't know how authentic or how intent, like what the intent is. It's just, is this because everyone else is doing it, or is this something that you genuinely care about? And I think that that's an important thing that people need to realize, that people are looking at that. A lot of people are asking for transparency. A lot of people are asking for people to be honest. And I think more so than anything, that's kind of where I feel like that, like my role as head of talent, who's like sort of always outsourcing, always meeting the talent, always immersed in culture, they will ask me those questions and I have to be prepared to answer that. And I think as an organization, we wouldn't obviously be doing our job if we weren't transparent about where we're at in our journey and about the things that we are planning to do in the further future.
I love that, Shani. And I think what strikes me there is just the simple pragmatism of the notion that if this matters to you and it's part of your value system, you can organically reflect the work in your daily operations as an organization. I think sometimes we overthink this work, and we get calculated, and it becomes contrived. And there's just such an ability to say, hey, this matters to us. Let's look at the natural ways that the work manifests in our daily work. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing at the Elephant Room. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
And Simon, I've had a chance to hear your podcast. I love it. I know you are, helping organizations really lead this transformation in what you lead at Sminty. You're mobilizing training, and you're getting a chance to really work at the helm with a lot of leaders who are trying to take this journey. So tell us about, how did you get into this work, and what has made you so passionate to help leaders navigate through it?
Thank you. I wear a few hats. I'll be talking about the training consultancy that I do, and the podcast, the BBC Outs one, which I'm a co-host, and another one called The Way We Roll, which I do with a friend. And then as I've got older, I've started to join boards. So I'm a trustee in a couple of organizations and a non-exec director, which is great because I really am at the sharp end then, and seeing what goes on at board level. The passion and the instigator for me, I used to have what I called was a proper job, and I worked for a bank, and it was a good job and I enjoyed it, but I always knew there had to be a bit more to it. I liked the people and I liked what we did, and it was a good organization. There was the gap, and essentially I came across other people who were working in the field of disability, advising large corporates. So I suddenly had this advantage of, one, I knew how large organizations worked. I used to run training courses for Barclays Bank, and it directly impacts me. I'm someone with dwarfism. I use a mobility scooter to get around. So I'm kind of in the gang. And a little bit like Shani, the bit I could never understand was why people just didn't get it. I thought people made this into a big issue or got a little bit muddled about it, and it didn't make any sense to me. So a lot of the time, the early days and the work we were doing was around leadership, but also around managers, to get them just to try and relax around this subject. And when I say subject, I'm talking specifically disability here, and not to be nervous about it. Over the last few years, it's slightly developed, and now I'm working with people who have disabilities or disabled people, depending on your language, and getting them to be more confident and comfortable. We have a little phrase that, do you cope with your impairment or do you manage it? And that's a shift. So you are now start being part of the process rather than being someone passive about it. If I'm really selfish, I love the freedom of being self-employed. I produce comedy as well. So I got an evening job, and that's a joy to do. And over the years, the work has allowed me to meet amazing people. So I'm going to countries where I'm meeting disability rights advocates, I'm meeting corporate lawyers, understanding the cultural differences to disability. And then I bump into them 5 years later and they remember something or they did something. And that's really kind of cool and special to know that that has an impact. And I feel kind of privileged that I can go into these rooms, people listen to me, and they don't always take it on, but sometimes they will.
Yeah, that's incredible. And what a beautiful, notion that you're touching all these lives, and you've had a chance to witness a lot of this transformation that's happened. And I think we all can agree right now, we're barely scratching the surface of what's possible in the space and also what's needed in the space. So Simon, thank you for your work, and I have to hear some of your comedy as a next step after hearing your podcast. So I think that's a great segue into this next piece, which is, for us at Mathison, one of the first things we did is we tried to research all the different parts of the hiring process where there's potential bias and that employers can transform. And we've actually started to put these insights into a book called Hiring for Diversity that comes out later this year, where I intend to actually interview you three. So stay tuned. But I'd love to just find out from each of you, as you see the barriers that job seekers face today, job seekers from underrepresented communities, when they enter the hiring process where potential inequity or bias exists, where do you see those greatest challenges? And Scarlett, maybe we could start with you. Where are the greatest challenges sort of facing underrepresented job seekers today in hiring?
Yeah, I think a massive challenge for job seekers is that idea of culture fit. And I think that creates a lot of bias in interviewing and the hiring process, because I think as much as businesses say, they want that different, amazing, standout candidate, there's still a lot of kind of pigeonholing that goes on, and people do want to put people in boxes. And businesses can be very specific about the type of person they want. They've got to fit the existing team. They've got to follow in other people's footsteps. They've got to represent our values. And it's like a battle between wanting to find that snowflake candidate, but then also wanting someone to be really predictable. And it's really hard for job seekers to navigate that. You do know whether you're coming or going. And I think it'd be fantastic to really see more businesses do away with that culture fit kind of model and find people that go against the grain a bit more, and people that could actually enrich the culture a bit more.
Man, I love that, Scarlett. That it's so spot on. And we think that culture fit is such like yesterday's news, and yet to your point, we hear it constantly from hiring managers, from recruiters. So I love that. I think we can make it a 2021 imperative to stricken that term from our vocabulary, right? Great point. And that's something I think every leader can commit to doing, right? Shani, how about you? So as you look at some of the barriers that job seekers face today in the hiring process, what comes up for you top of mind?
I think I think that like a lot of, I mean, I could go on for ages on this, but a lot of it is like, for me, everyone has an application process, right? So you know the sort of process that you take, and it's kind of going back to what I said earlier about within that application process. So for example, I've spoken to a lot of corporate companies, and they like maybe throughout their process, you have to take like a numerical or literacy test or something like that. And a lot of the time, they find that by default, when they're hiring sort of people from a certain class or certain race background, they tend to fall off at that point when they have to take the numerical test. Now, if you look at the disparities in the education system in the UK, Black boys are 100 times more likely to be excluded from the age of 7. Now, if we know that within this education system there is already bias, if you guys watched Small Axe by Steve McQueen, this is not even a plug, it's just an education learning, you will see that we have a history of this. It's systemic. And of course, when they then get to spaces or opportunities like that, where they have to take certain tests and stuff, there is a chance that, you know, they may fall off, or they may not be familiar with the type of language or whatever it is that they're testing for, which then enables, well, I suppose this enables them to enter that and to get that job. And I think what a lot of recruiting people don't know, or I'd say employers don't know, is that actually people learn differently. I'm a visual learner. Some people learn just hands-on interactive. Some people can listen to something and then, you know, boom, they can repeat it after that. And we know this. And if you are saying as an organization, you're trying to get more diversity of thought, and you want different people from around the table because you want to get different experiences from different backgrounds, then of course you can't have one process for everyone. Like, surely you know that. So when you find that these people are dropping off at this point, or you find that the stats aren't fitting in that department because of X or here, create alternative processes for different types of people entering the organization. And what that takes is time. It takes time, it takes resource, it takes new thinking. And a lot of organizations, to be honest, they're just lazy. They don't want to. They don't want to put in that time. They want like a shoe fits all kind of thing. They want one program or one unconscious bias training that's then going to fix everything, and that's not going to happen, because where you're hiring from and the places where these people are coming from, you're asking for where these people are coming from, they're coming from places where they don't have the experience from the people that currently exist in the organization, and that is what you need to change, the system. And I think a lot of the time organizations they're almost like they don't think that deeply into what the problem is, and that is the problem. Do you know what I mean? It's like when it's like if you're someone who is a part of a community. For example, I'm a part of a community just for women and women who identify as non-white. Now, of course, there are going to be white men who can't enter that space, and they're recruiters. But what they do is they create a network where they've got a woman who exists within that community. So when there are jobs going, or when there are different people, they can connect with their different networks and say, I know that I have to respect this space because that's the boundary, but actually, can you share this for me? But what people then use an excuse, but you know, they have all these marginalized groups and represented groups, and we can't enter them. So how do they expect us to enter that space? And it's like, well, go and network and find some friends in those spaces, so that they can continue to share. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I know, and it happens. It happens because, and then they take the recruitment, the traditional recruitment route, where they just go for a recruitment agency that again clones of them, and then it continues to get the same type of loopholes. And then they make excuses like, you know, you should respect people's spaces, people who identify, whether it be as disabled, whether it be as LGBT, whether it be as Black, whether it be as women, you should respect the spaces that they've created for themselves. And then by that, you create friends that exist in those spaces where they can then continue to share the different networks. And more often than not, they feel like they've been shut out rather than let in. And it's like, well, people are allowed to have their safe spaces. And I think more often than not, they don't find ways in. And that's the problem as well.
Wow. Yeah, I think what a great notion too of looking at the fact that if we're talking about diversity, you know, we can't have this conforming narrow process that's only built around one use case. We have to have an inclusive process that meets people where they are. And I think that's a great philosophy for leaders to be kind of harnessing. Simon, how about for you? I mean, especially, I know that you, of course, have such a great insight into particularly the accessibility aspects of hiring. But what do you see as the greatest challenges today facing job seekers in the hiring process?
I'm going to pick up a little bit on Shani, who keeps feeding me these lovely little introductions that I can go on to. There's an organization called Valuable 500 that wants to get the boardroom to address disability, have it on the agenda. Created a video called Diverse-ish, which is, we do some subjects that we don't do all. Or next year we're going to do that one, but not this year, as if, you moment of doing it. I still think with disability, now I would say this, wouldn't I? There can be an awkwardness. There can be an avoidance of the subject. Sometimes that could be in different countries, the phrasing, and I've seen things like diff-ability and just basically anything not to say the word disability, which I find peculiar, because that for me denies that this is a rights issue, and we need to speak as is, because then we can start looking at removing the barriers, and the language isn't necessarily the barrier in disability. But equally, there'll be some people who have conditions that are nervous and they're saying, should I mention this? Should I bring it forward? At what point? Well, if I'm going through a recruitment process, maybe it's the last thing I'm going to say, because I don't want to complicate matters or give them a reason. I think this is a moving picture. I think we're getting people with long COVID, and I'm thinking, is this a new type of disability? I'm thinking mental ill health is going to come flying over the horizon, because many countries have spent the last year in very difficult, or the individuals, we've all been shut at home and experienced very different ways to live. So as soon as you think you've got a definition of something, it's going to change again. And ultimately, there are brilliant managers about, and there's brilliant organizations. There always is, but some can be hesitant. Some can resist that change or feel there's a complication. In terms of pure accessibility, and I think we need to be careful. Sometimes, Shani mentioned laziness, and I think that can be part of it. I think it can be oversight. People forget that to build in disability access and only realize afterwards that they've missed it. We've got AI coming in that is going to get rid of bias, but if you are a deaf person and you speak differently, or if you have a facial scar or disfigurement of some sort, that could throw you off, because the AI is not built to have that sort of difference of face or that difference of speech, or even if you eyesight, that could be moving. So we could be creating things that are discriminating, and just the process is one of my suggestions of a solution, so I'll save it. But you will have these one size fits all. It's already been mentioned, but is that accessible to someone who uses a screen reader? Is that accessible to someone who has dyslexia? Or do we have an alternative way? You may not be able to get it perfect every time, but so long as we've got a plan B and there's a way that I can apply and get my skills and abilities over to you.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right about the fact that the mental health we're going to see coming up a ton in this next year because of the events of the last year. And you're right that we don't always look at communities through a similar lens of equal bearing in terms of diversity. So I think there's such an opportunity for us to elevate leaders so that they're aware that we don't need to look at diversity through such a myopic lens.
Yeah, for sure.
And I guess that's a great segue into if you're a leader right now listening to this panel, and you've done little to advance this work, but you have woken up in the last year to say, wow, this is a need and I need to do something. I would love to maybe just open it up to everyone. What are small wins and easy ways that individual leaders can actually start to mobilize change in inclusive hiring to just get started, to make progress. And maybe we could start with you, Shani. What sort of strikes you as sort of, early wins, easy wins here?
Easy wins. So I think, well, for us at the Elephant Room, we have for example, a sub brand that we have, which is called the Creative Storytellers Network. And by that, we do like events. We've done a virtual event. We've done our 1 month mentors program, and it's had such amazing impact for those who have been involved. And for us, it's very little cost, very little resource, but it's something so easy where we've created an external network where we know if we do have a job, if we do have a client, or we do have a project, we can go onto that community because we've built value around that community. So I would ask like, you know, the employers and the leaders within the organization, where are the sub communities that you can tap into and create something as an extension of the organization and give value? So for example, a lot of the time I remember there's organizations that have they tell you can do a volunteer week and you can pick any place to go and do that. But actually, why not just create a small community as an extension of your company and invite different people into that? It could be managed online, and you just hear different voices, talk to different people, and get your staff to sign up and get them to have conversation with them. It's not them, you know, volunteering their time to disadvantaged people, or, you know, it's not seen as something that's charitable. It's just seen as something as a learning, and then whatever learning they get from that, you can then ease that back into the business and find out what that value is. Because I feel like a lot of the time it's kind of like an extension, like, you know, oh guys, we really want you to do X. But actually, if you embed it into the company ethos, that guys, as a part of our learning and as a part of our ongoing commitment to being diverse, to making sure we're committed to hearing from different voices and new voices, we are going to create X. Everyone's going to be signed up, and we just want you to talk to different people. Now, that's not a hard task. We have to talk to people every day. Do you know what I mean? And more than ever, people want to be connected right now. And I think that's an easy win for an organization, because you're constantly learning. We're constantly talking about trends, constantly talking about cultures. We're seeing people create platforms. We're seeing partnerships, collaborations. People are talking about sustainability, mental health, future of work, like all those different things. And, you know, they're valuable to the organization, to the conversation, and to the future proof of the organization as well. So if you can create a community internally and invite external people within that to just create conversation, the amount of learning that will come out of that is incredible. And that's an easy win for me.
I love that. Starting with building community and tapping into existing community. Scarlett, how about you? So if you know, leaders are interested in making some incremental progress on this front, what are some easy wins from your vantage point?
Yeah, I was going to say something really similar to Shani. I completely agree. Like it really starts for me with your existing team. Before you even think about bringing in the external people, you've got to think about, you know, are the existing team on board? Like, are they, you know, are we creating this inclusive environment? Because how can you communicate that to a new starter if there's no feeling of that in the existing team? And I guess that once people are on board, it really translates to the hiring process. And when people are interviewing candidates, it's really going to shine through if they're coming from, you know, an amazing, inclusive, diverse kind of culture. You know, it's going to shine through, because if I do a screening call with a candidate and they say, oh, you know, tell me about your culture at A Million Ads. What's it like? What do you love about working there? You know, I light up because I love to talk about it, and I love the culture. And we all have such a great atmosphere and a great environment, and that's really going to shine when you have that and you're talking to candidates. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about getting that feedback from employees, finding out you know, where knowledge gaps are and where education needs to be, you know, put in, and also, again, to the point what Shani was saying, finding where those communities are, because you might already have an existing, you know, pool of people that work there that can do some education pieces. So it's kind of using your own kind of diverse people as a resource to really get that kind of word out and get that environment going.
Yeah, and you know, it's such an authentic way to tap into the, you know, what's already there versus looking so externally, which is oftentimes the knee-jerk reaction. Simon, for you, as you helped leaders navigate this change, because I imagine a lot of folks come to you and say, hey, this seems like it's overwhelming how much we need to do, right? How have you guided leaders to say, hey, here's here's an easy win?
I should write a book if I had that.
Yes, you should.
I'm going to be slightly controversial.
Please.
There's a couple of straightforward ones, and we've already alluded to it, which is get some people in the know who are affected by whatever we're doing to give you some feedback. I'm a bit cautious of that now, and I mentioned that twice for two reasons. One, lived experience is really helpful. It's really useful, and it's so critical and authentic. But it doesn't mean to say that someone's therefore an expert on all areas of this. So, or the other bit, which makes me feel very angry, is we've had lived experience, and that was really helpful. Now go away, and we'll go and start making some decisions. And that annoys me. Keep them in the room when you're making the decisions. Have those people stick around. Depending on the size of the organization, I would want 10 people with different disabilities to go through the process, the old mystery shopping type thing. And they can see where the clunky bits are, how far they got. Did they get dropped out of the system? Was that an access issue, or was it a bias issue, or was it something that we can sort of look at and we can really tell how does that process work for people? And similarly, if you are a really smart organization and you've got a bigger reach, the things like the career development, I think there is a huge amount of wasted talent in all of these areas. We know that, but obviously disability is a passion of mine. And it's getting those people job ready. If they haven't had the right education, if they've kind of thought that a lot of their stuff is a negative and they don't realize the skills that they've got, it's getting them smarter and wiser about how to go through that process in the first place. It was already mentioned earlier, the recruitment agencies are critical to this. If you use someone, tell them that you want something different. I know some organizations that have incentivized them, said we'll pay you more if you give us good quality candidates that are different. My last bit, which is a sort of call to action, I feel it's happening. I don't know whether it was this last year, but just get on and do it, please. It's a kind of,
I love it.
well, we've got to make it all perfect and we've got to get it all right. And like you said, that's overwhelming. So don't worry, just try a few things, get a few successes, but stop faffing around.
So true, Simon. We talk about progress versus perfection. We don't need perfection. We just need progress, right?
Much better. Thank you. Yeah.
And I appreciate the point you made about, feedback, because you're right. I think it's easy to externalize a lot of this, and lived experience will always trump anything else. So really appreciate you mentioning that. So everyone, if we zoom out, let's just fast forward into the future. I think a lot of people this last year were wishing for a time machine where they could fast forward into the future. We're now here. We're now in a little bit more of the future. But let's say it's 10 years from today, and we're describing to a friend the way that the workforce, the way that the hiring process operates today. Okay. Dream with me about what it resembles, and maybe just a piece of it for you as you're describing it to someone maybe new to the workforce who's like, I'm about to go get a job. What is that process like now? Okay. We've done all of our work. We've mobilized extraordinary change together. What is the inclusive hiring process of 2031 look like? And Simon, maybe we can go backwards, and I can start with you on this one because I just put you on the spot.
I did struggle. It's a good question and it's a hard question. Maybe a sort of a few words, which if the caution's there, then we won't make the mistakes when we get to 31. Accepting that managers or recruiters are not going to be an expert on every single issue of diversity and then every thread underneath that. So just to giving them the confidence and the comfortableness to be able to have the right conversation at the right time and to be able to ask for the specific questions. So they just loosen it up a little bit. That for me could be a really strong, a powerful tool. Obviously, as tech moves on, it is fantastic and it is enabling so many people. But we've got to remember, and I've alluded to this already before, there may need to still be more than one process. Don't necessarily just throw out one process because you think you've got this all singing, all dancing, because there'll be a few people that you've now excluded, and we need to have a route B to get in. I do like combination. I'm a big fan. If I wanted to go for a job, I feel I should be able to apply for it as regular Simon and my skills stand for them, but also there may be a disability route in there as well that just gives me a little bit more support, reassures me that the adjustments or the accommodations that I will need are going to be there. And it also tells me that this is an open and a cool organization with this. So I don't think sometimes having those specialisms, twin tracks. So I have the choice, whichever one suits me best. Another bigger picture, which I slightly worry for 10 years is I think we're making some of this really complicated. And I think academia is getting very involved. Now, it is essential to have that because they do research and they come up with new concepts and ideas. But I want to translate that. I'm getting invited onto some training courses and I read it and it's a complex philosophical essay. And I'm thinking, if I'm a manager, have I got 2 hours to read and absorb and analyze this? So making sure whatever we do end up with isn't overly complex and it's really the elements that it gives us. My last wish, and this goes against what I used to think. I wanted all managers to be brilliant and we would get it. I think with some of these issues like disability, you might need a single person overseeing it. And that might mean they've got a budget, it means they've got experience, it means they've got other tools in the box that will help everybody through the process. So having someone knowledgeable is critical and it's a sort of link.
Sometimes it's great to have that champion who's the point person and not to have it, spread out. You're right. And I love your point about simplicity. You're right. We are overly complicating what can be an accessible, pragmatic conversation, and great point. Amazing. And Shani, would love to maybe move to you. Dream big. What does this look like in 10 years?
Oh, that's such a hard one.
I know.
I think I would hope that we rethink HR and head of people, head of talent, head of culture, and we can combine it all. And maybe we can do something where it's like we have almost like field agents. So people who don't even necessarily spend time, as much time in the office or in the organization, but instead they're spending time in the communities and they're spending time within culture and they're building networks and black books and specialist people to then bring back to the organization. And then they're it's almost like a cross education of this is what's going on, these are the trends happening, these are the people to be hired, these are the people to be looking out for. And it's a constant conversation, constant communication relationship that's happening, and that organization is just constantly building. And that's how we're looking at what human resource looks like. That's how we're looking at what process looks like. That's how we're looking at what culture looks like for our organization, and that's how we're building teams. So I feel like hopefully it's going to be more hands-on, where people are quite literally out there in the space and immersing themselves before they're bringing back the information that's necessary. I mean, I don't know if that's a thing.
I love it. That's such a cool idea. I like the field agents and blending these roles and functions, and awesome, Shani. So Scarlett, how about you? What's the big dream for 10 years from now?
My big dream. Do you know what? I agree. I think the word HR, it's so antiquated. I'd love to see human resources as a department just abolished, because it is. It's just got such a bad kind of vibe about it now. I think it's very box ticky and it's very corporate, and it just doesn't feel inclusive, really. To me, I'd love to see it as, I don't know how you can replace it, and I don't know, maybe it's something more that's concerned with keeping people engaged and included and making sure that everyone is kind of happy, and it's that kind of culture and staff happiness piece, I guess. And I think that's what HR is really more about these days, rather than the kind of policy side and the more kind of legislative side. I think that needs to be brought way more to the forefront and really championed way more, because I think it does get a bit of a bad rep. So I'd love to see something something more around that in 10 years time, being what HR is. And yeah, maybe a complete name change as well, just to move it aside.
Yeah, I like that. I think a lot of people are with you on that, wanting to rebrand, retool, reintegrate HR. I'm with you. I think I hear human resources and it reminds me of like personnel management, which was the thing, right? It's like, you know, but I really love that. And I think, you know, for me, the dream is that every person in an organization feels an equal level of responsibility for advancing diversity, equity, inclusion in their organization. And I think right now, today, so often this work is put on the shoulders of too few. It's not a responsibility enough of leaders. It's not individual, you know, contributors don't feel like they know what to do and how to support the movement. And so I think that's a lot of what we can democratize in this next decade, right? So as we close out and you were to give leaders on the call one piece of advice of what to do next right now as a result of this, and really sort of as a result of the time that we're in and the change that we really can bring to life in equitable hiring, what's one piece of advice that you'd have? And Scarlett, maybe we could start with you.
Sure. I think I'd like to go back to the whole idea of the culture fit model, and just say that I think my piece of advice would be to just get rid of that completely, and look at doing a more culture ad model, which is something that we've been doing at A Million Ads. So we've been trying to, you know, move away from that view of like, oh, does this person fit with how the rest of us are? Because why on earth do you want someone that's exactly the same as everyone else? What diversity are you ever going to get from that? So I think it's changing the mindset of recruitment to be more, you know, how can we enrich our culture, and what can we add, and what's this person bringing to the table that, you know, we don't have at the moment.
Such a good one. Such an immediately actionable. I pledge to do this next month. I love that, Scarlett. Thank you. Shani, how about you? What's that one piece of advice you would have for someone listening in today?
I think for me, I would say listen to what your people are telling you, listen to what the community is saying, listen to, you know, just what's happening within culture, learn from that, and then deliver. I think a lot of people spend time like doing big education pieces and workshops, etc., and then you don't actually see like the actual actionable change. And a lot of the time it's like, yes, that might take time, but kind of like what we was talking about with the small wins, like I think people kind of expect to, when they're sort of coming with this diversity, equity and inclusion agenda, they've got to come with this big pledge that they're pledging lots of money, or they're doing this massive internal disruption. And it's like, actually, no, like, we just want you to be transparent, show that you're learning, and show that you're delivering like case by case. And like you said, it's about progress, not perfection. So for me, it's about just making sure that it's a constant journey of showcasing that whatever you're learning, you're then taking positive action and then delivering against those learnings. And for every organization, those learnings and those experiences and those necessary actions are different. So I can't necessarily say that, but whatever your people are telling you, make sure you're delivering against whatever it is that they need.
Love that. I love that. And I think that, you know, we have a chance to your point, just to really listen and start that conversation with our people. It's such a great fertile ground for planting this work, right? Simon, what's the advice you would have for leaders who are wanting to get started here?
And I interpret that as if you're someone who's passionate about this and wants to do something in their organization. So I would go up to a leader and say, I need you as my ally. I need you to get this. I need you to open the doors. I need you to support me. I need you to buy into this. Because once you've got that, then the momentum starts to happen. I would go back. We've said it 4 times. Speak to the people I've already got in the organization. Tell me what's good, what's bad. Get that sort of expert advice back. And my last big bit is, we haven't cracked this, and we've been doing it a long time. Well, people like me have. So I kind of think you got to be radical. I think you've got to not hesitate, say, we're going to try something completely different, because doing the same speeches, events, awareness, it hasn't changed the numbers sufficiently. So maybe next generation, something radical, something amazing, and give it a go.
Wow, I love it.
I like that.
I like the concept of being radical. Yeah.
Yeah, same.
Well, listen, Scarlett, Shani, Simon, thank you all three, not only for your leadership and for your insight today, but for your courage in your own work leading this work. You know, I think you all three have been at the helm of this far before it was cool to be at the helm of it, like it is today. You know, and I think I just appreciate your stories, your vulnerability, and your generosity in sharing with us how we can help mobilize this change. And you know, to close out, I think we're going to be sharing out some resources and some of the themes that we highlighted today in the conversation. And this is just the start of, I'm sure, many more exciting conversations to come. So thank you all, and
thank you.
enjoy the rest of the day.
And you take care.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.